Hello everyone. Welcome to this course series on Kingdee AI Suite. In this session, we will focus on an introductory hands-on tutorial for the print designer. I will walk you through the entire design process using a practical case. Before setting up the print template, we must first clarify the printing requirements. For example, I need to print some header data from the purchase order, such as organization, supplier name, code, status, and other fixed text data. I also need to print some order details, such as all the material details data, according to the format of the document table. So how should such a print template be created? First, let's open Print Template. For standard documents, corresponding print templates are predefined in the system. For example, if template type is System Template, it is predefined. If the predefined template does not meet our needs, we can copy and modify a template as needed. I have already copied a template. Opening it brings us to the Print Designer interface, which includes numerous features. I will explain key points and features one by one. First, we can see that the entire canvas serves as the functional area for Print Designer settings. Controls can be dragged on the canvas, with alignment guides appearing between them. These guides help you design template details. Some tables can also be set up similar to Excel, with options to merge, delete, drag, and batch select cells. The first section is the top toolbar, where we can set the font style, font size, bold, and customize borders. Next, let's look at the controls on the left panel, which are frequently used. I'll introduce them one by one. The first control is text. The text control can be used for titles or standalone labels. We can directly enter the fixed text or bind a form field on the right panel. For example, binding the document number. After binding, we can set the size and bold style and adjust its width and height by dragging. This is the text feature. After binding a field, we can see the corresponding control attributes on the right side. In fact, each control has different attributes. For the text control, if the bound field is a plain text, the format will be general. If it is numeric or an amount, the format will display the corresponding value, amount, date, or time. Each format has specific features. For example, amount supports currency type, amount, in words, and more. Alternatively, a more convenient method is to drag fields directly from the data source panel onto the canvas. This automatically generates a title and a bound field. All fields can be added this way for faster setup. That covers the text control. Next is the image control. It supports two methods, binding an image field from the document or uploading a fixed image. For example, we can upload a company logo as a fixed image. The QR code and barcode controls function similarly but differ in display format. We can enter the fixed text content or bind a field. After users scan the code, the field content will be displayed. QR codes are typically used to store key information. Next is the rich text control, which serves specific scenarios and is less commonly used. For example, when we need special text styles on a document such as varied fonts, sizes, colors, or embedded tables and images within a single text block, the rich text can be used. To print such composite content, we can use the rich text control and bind it to a rich text field. Make sure that we bind the correct field type. If a plain text field is bound, the output will be no different from a regular text control. So we must be careful. The straight line control is an auxiliary element for drawing horizontal or vertical lines. Next, let's move on to the table controls, focusing on these three types: data table, entry grid, and layout grid. In fact, this template uses two table controls, a layout grid at the top and a data table below. What's the difference between a layout grid and data table? Let me explain. A layout grid is usually used for fixed layout formats. For example, printing header data where the content is relatively static. Contact information, names, and phone numbers are also fixed data. We can assign a specific text or fields to fixed columns in the table settings. What scenarios are data tables generally used for? Data tables are commonly used for printing detailed data on documents. For example, in this purchase order, If I want to print the entries in the order details and the material data, since the detailed data is dynamic, it may print 10 or more rows, dynamically displayed according to the document details. Each field corresponds to a column, and when there are multiple dynamic detail data rows, this is the scenario where a data table should be used. This is the difference between the two table controls. The editing operations for both tables are similar. For example, we can select a row, merge cells, or undo. We can also bind fields, delete rows, columns, add, insert, or merge. Similar to Excel, data tables differ in that they have a fixed header row by default, which can be deleted. The data row is bound to the entry data and is dynamic. Only this changes. Header and total rows are fixed at the top and bottom. Also, each table has different features. For example, grids have some attribute settings, such as auto-fit row height, which can be enabled as needed. Data tables also have various attributes. Let's cover a few common ones. Rows printed every page is used when there is a lot of detailed data. For example, if an order has 100 material rows, we can set it to print exactly 10 rows per page across 10 pages. This ensures a complete and tidy layout on each page. In such scenarios, we can set rows printed every page as 10. Before setting it, we need to set the header region to be fixed and set the header content to be printed on all pages so that the header can be printed on the top of each page. Now, the entry grid. It uses the same data source as the data table, both bound to detail data, but the display format differs. In our earlier demonstration, the data table displays information mainly in fixed columns, while the entry rows are output row by row. But the entry grid works differently. It is typically used when each entry needs to be printed in a specific, repeated layout. For example, when we print asset detail cards, where each detail needs to be output as its own table-style card, the entry grid is the appropriate choice. We need to drag the table onto the canvas, estimate rows and columns, and bind detailed data like material details. I can preview how the print output will look. For instance, I show titles in this column and then the corresponding fields in the next. When I print, each entry will output as a separate table. 2 entries will produce 2 tables. To improve readability, we can set spacing between entries on the right panel. Entry grid also has various functional attributes that can be enabled as needed. After setup, we save the template and preview it in the purchase order interface to see the differences. In print settings, we select our newly configured template and click Print. The top section shows header data, while the data table below prints multiple rows based on the document entries. The entry grid at the bottom prints each entry as a separate table. 2 entries yield 2 tables. Spacing between tables is displayed as configured. This is the key difference between the data table and the entry grid. In summary, data tables display dynamic data rows, while entry grids output 1 table per entry. Different controls serve different presentation needs based on the scenario. That's all for the controls. Next, we will talk about print settings. Print settings apply to the entire template, not individual controls. Let me explain a few core features. The first is file name. It is used to name PDF or Excel files generated during template printing. When we want to distinguish files by document name or number during printing, we can customize the file name by inserting form fields. For example, if we use document number as the file name, the output PDF file will then be named using the document number. Other settings like paper size are self-explanatory and can be configured independently. Now we will cover the language part. For global businesses, we need templates in multiple languages. We can switch languages here. For example, switching to Chinese will display the Chinese format. This is predefined. Predefined templates come pre-translated. For custom templates, any English text we added would need manual translation, whereas predefined templates are already localized for fixed texts. Let me introduce the purpose of the background image. Background image is used for pre-printed forms or fixed layout paper. For example, an express slip has a fixed layout. Uploading its image helps align print fields. The background image aids layout drag fields to precise positions for quick setup. It is important to ensure that the image size corresponds to the actual paper size. Otherwise, the print result may be misaligned. The above covers the basic features of the entire print designer. Now, let's look at more advanced features. First, page breaks. If a template has excessive content, like multiple tables, that doesn't fit one page, we can add new pages. We can add a new page and place controls on the new page. Second, pages to print. To fix controls on specific pages, batch select them and set printing for all pages, first page or last page on the right side. Third, formula. This is more advanced. So far, we've mostly bound single fields. If the field I need to bind is a concatenated value, for example, combining the text or multiple fields so that the output is displayed as a merged result, I can use the functions on the right panel such as time functions, conditional functions, or mathematical functions. These functions can be applied based on our requirements. Formula usage is somewhat similar to Excel, but with differences. Each function includes description accessible here. For details, refer to the community document. Next, let's look at the associated data source. When I print a purchase order, if the data on the current document does not meet my printing requirements, and I also need to print another goods receipt document, specifically the details of the items that have already been received, I can include that additional information as well. This requires adding an associated data source via the pop-up window. Of course, when configuring the association with another document, we must define the relationship between the two documents. Only then can the system identify which goods receipt document corresponds to the purchase order and retrieve the relevant goods receipt document data. The use of associated data sources is slightly more advanced. For more details, refer to the dedicated community document. If all these configurations still cannot meet the printing requirement, a printing plugin is also provided, allowing you to develop additional features to meet your needs. That concludes the introduction to the features of the entire print designer. Once the print template is ready, how do we use it on documents? When selecting a template, we specify which document type it's for. So let's navigate to that document, for example, purchase order, where a print button is available in the list or detail view. For custom documents added via extension, we can add the button in the developer platform. Standard products include the print button by default. In print settings, we can select our new template and the desired language. We can choose English, Chinese, or other languages. Then we can preview or download the file directly. As shown, using the document number as the file name works as expected. If the default print options are insufficient, additional print buttons are available. For example, cloud printing and local printing can record the exact number of prints. Print by template and other personalized buttons can be added via the developer platform. This concludes the hands-on tutorial of printing. The print designer offers more than covered here. You can customize based on your needs, or visit the Cloud Community Printing section for further guidance.